Now we will have Dr. Sarah Ronis. She's the EIIC Advocacy Domain Lead. She's most importantly our Community Engagement Domain Co-Lead. We have Ms. Jennifer Talley, who's the EIIC Advocacy Domain Project Manager. And they're from Case Reserve University, Rainbow Babies, and Children's Hospitals. Let's welcome Sarah, Dr. Ronis, and Mrs. Talley.
Sarah is great. Thank you so much, Lonnie. So our goal for this session is that you will walk away with some very concrete examples of why it is so valuable to engage families in quality improvement, healthcare operations, and research teams. That you'll have some ideas of actionable strategies along the community engagement continuum to do so, and that you'll be able to recognize some key considerations and potential pitfalls that you may encounter when working with families. We've heard throughout the day various perspectives on all of these topics from academicians, community partners, outreach specialists, youth advisors, and others. So I'm really pleased that over the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to bring voices of parents and families into this broader conversation. Okay, Lonnie, you can jump to next. Our goal for the session really is for it to be a conversation. And to make that happen, we've asked members of the Emergency Medical Services for Children Family Advisory Network to join us. We have a few prepared questions that my colleague Jen is going to use to keep the conversation moving. I'm going to pop in periodically to highlight some relevant literature and related resources. And you'll note in our slides, there are some QR codes that will link you to specific tools or resources that we reference. We do ask that you please drop any questions that you have into the Q&A, and Jen and I will do our best to integrate them into the conversation as we go. So to kick us off, I'd like to invite each of our panelists to introduce themselves. And specifically, we'd love for you to share with the group a little bit about yourself, which family organizations you have worked with either now or in the past, and why you chose to get involved in their work. And Darlene, I've got you on my screen up front, so I'm going to have you start.
Hello, everyone. Darlene Shelton from Missouri. I am a grandmother to 3 amazing kiddos that have hemophilia B, which brought us into the rare disease community really 13 years ago and led to us creating the Danny's Dose Alliance 10 years ago to advocate and improve specialized emergency care for individuals with particular rare and chronic conditions that require care not within the standing scope of practice. And that brought me to learn about EMS for children. And to date, we have 19 states that have made regulatory changes regarding administration of patient-carried specialty meds. And we're working on disease-specific treatment guidelines, and we love educating families on emergency preparedness. So that's what I do in my spare time.
Love it. All right, Greta, I'm going to throw it to you next.
Hi, my name is Greta James Maxfield. Thank you so much for having us today and for your interest in our work. I live here in Texas, and I am the mother of a young man that just turned 26 years old yesterday, and he has autism that was diagnosed back when he was 2.5. That sent me into a world of searching and seeking, and really with a condition like autism, when there's so many unanswered questions for a layperson like myself, in some ways, that evens the playing field on some level. I became concerned with how we might what we might encounter in case of an emergency or a disaster. I do live here in Texas, so it's not unheard of. There are many situations like that that might be anticipated. That led me to Texas Parent to Parent, where I now work, and I serve as the medical education coordinator. I work with medical residents to help them broaden their scope of just stories and family voices that they have heard, and to better understand what their role will be in the lives of families that they serve. And I also work with just families on a day-to-day basis, answering the phone, answering their calls about the various situations that they face, up to and including all manner of medical conditions that they might be facing, as well as um, how to prepare for emergencies, disasters, when there are complex needs. So thank you.
All right. And then our third advisor with us today is Jill McCormick. Jill, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Jill may be having some technical difficulties. So I'm going to do a little troubleshooting on the back end, but in the meantime, I'm going to hand off to Jen to get the conversation going. And Lonnie, if you want to jump to the next slide, we're ready to go.
Outstanding. Thank you guys so much for having us. I'm thrilled to be here and facilitating this conversation with some of my favorite people. And they'll become your favorite people too, I know it. So friends, can you speak a little bit about the benefits of including patients and families in operations QI or research teams? And feel free to draw from your personal experience about a time when you've been included in this and you really brought something to folks' attention that they were like, oh, whoa, never thought of that. Darlene, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. As I said, we're a bleeding disorders family, and so I have had the opportunity to speak to many EMS services and with being part of EMS for Children to many different groups. And one thing that I can speak to is the fact that, for instance, clotting factor is carried by the families. It's very expensive. It's only available at level 1 trauma centers in most states, meaning 1 to 4 hospitals. That was not an awareness that everyone had. And so it was such an eye opener to be able to be part of that conversation early on, so that in the planning for a disaster, they were thinking, oh my goodness, we're going to have patients with rare medications that only they carry, and we need to make allowances for that. And so it allowed for an entirely different conversation. And that's why I feel like it's important to have that family perspective, because as much as a professional as you are, as hard as you try, there's no way one person can know about these various conditions and the different ramifications that families have, particularly when they have a child with complex needs.
Great, Darlene. And I think it really dovetails. I was thinking of the hypertension guidelines that I've been sitting in on, that because when you realized that there weren't specific guidelines for kiddos for EMS, you were like, oh, maybe we need to create something. And you've really pulled together this beautiful multidisciplinary team. Do you want to talk a little bit about how you did that?
Creating relationships. I think that is really key. And I really believe it's showing up with the intent to share information and be part of a team. You're not placing blame, you're not accusing in any way, you're not insinuating that someone is ignorant or doesn't care, whatever. All those things can come across that way. And everyone in medicine, I've learned, has had that happen. They've been blamed, they've been accused, and to come at it from a different perspective and say, hey, we realize this is the situation. We are willing to be part of the problem. And how do we all work together? And so that's from the EMS side. And then also from the rare disease side, they didn't realize what I had learned in EMS because I showed up at the table. I showed up. Really, I mean, that's kind of part of it. Show up with a very nice attitude. And I was able to create relationships on the rare and chronic disease side. And then, my opinion is if you get all of the smart people at the table, you can create some really good product and content.
I love that. And you're one of the smart people too. Greta, do you want to talk a little bit about some experiences you've had in being included in some operations QI or research teams, and how you feel that you've impacted those groups?
I think that it's really beneficial for clinicians to hear directly from families and to really cultivate their listening ear and cultivate the art that they bring to the practice of medicine by by truly tuning into those voices because, you know, as we often mention to our residents that we train, um, medicine used to really take place in one room with one patient or with their family around telling a story. And as much as it's important to, incorporate research and, learn from big aggregate studies, there's so much about the individual case that can go unheard in the with that sort of practice of medicine and emergency medicine. And so, there's a great benefit and value in just learning from a multitude of voices. My son has a condition that is not really, um, it can't be put in an aggregate sort of box, I guess, there are so many different um, sort of presentations of autism. It's a spectrum disorder. I think actually many other conditions have that sort of spectrum. And so by listening to individual patients, when you're in the course of actually treating them, that's going to be important, but also having the practice to be able to listen to the nuances of a story and then bring your clinical expertise to it is just really important. Um, Also, parents, family members just have so many hours of observation that I think that most clinicians would be in a way envious of the amount of just raw data that we have in our minds and on our hearts and all of the variations that come from the seasons and from the time of day, from the situations that we face with our children. And, when there's an invisible condition such as autism or one that may curtail some communicative advantages that some other people may have, it's important to be able to use your observations and use that intuition that parents develop over time. And so I think that just clinicians having the opportunity to really speak to families, it's going to develop their art in ways that are incalculable, really.
That, Greta, I think you said a couple really important things there. You've met one patient with one experience. And I love that you referenced your deep knowledge. I remember one time, Greta, we were talking and you were like, I could have used like this knowledge space in my brain to learn about all kinds of things. But instead, here I am learning about all of this.
Hmm. For sure.
So
Yeah,
underscoring that wealth of knowledge that you are because of um, all
the
your
hours,
experiences. Yes,
the hours. Thank you.
outstanding. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide, Lonnie. For our next question, which is what are risks or potential unintended consequences of asking families to contribute? And I don't think we have Jill yet. I think we're still sorting that out. So Greta, can we start with you on this one? Um, what should folks think about when they're asking families to contribute that might be a risk or a roadblock or a challenge for families?
I think it's important to, when you invite a family to visit with you, to be sure that you're, of course, not just checking a box, that you haven't simply invited them there and then you're going to treat them like furniture or something like that, Um, but the other thing is that obviously there's going to be hierarchies that you already have in place within your organization and within your professional, just those hierarchies are there, and they're known to part of the group that's assembled, whereas the family that's coming into that, they're not really quite sure where all of those hierarchies are, but they do know that they are not necessarily going to be a part of those, because of any number of differences in their background as compared to the medical professionals that they're meeting with. So there's going to be the differences in education. Likely your families are going to have much less education, formal education than the professionals that they're working to help. And they're also going to perhaps have less professional stature too, like in terms of salary and title, etc. So and you don't want your collaborative to essentially reinforce all of those hierarchies and sort of continue a marginalization of some of the persons in the meeting. One of the ironies, I guess you all face this, is that often the people that are going to be judging the medical system are people that have really the least education. It's the people that are actually using those medical services. They may not always have the language to describe exactly what was good or bad technically, but they're certainly going to always remember the way that it made them feel, and the way that it the perception of the care that they've gotten. And so this is another reason it's just really important for doctors, for medical professionals, to have the experience of interfacing with people that ultimately offer the most sort of judgment of their services, and are the ones that fill out the surveys and are able to to comment on what their medical experience was like. So.
That, Greta. Love that. Catching the tokenism and making space for holding space for your family member, and not being cognizant of their feelings, emotions, and what participating might bring for them. Darlene, what are your thoughts on this?
So I actually had twofold. One was exactly what Greta had said, that everyone on the team, it needs to be made clear that you're going to have lay people and that they need to be shown respect. I've been at a lot of meetings. I literally have had said to me to my face, "You're just a grandmother from Southeast Missouri. What makes you think you have the right to tell me how to do my job?" So I mean, I've had some very mean things said to me when I'm just trying to help. So make sure that everyone on your team, that like before the patient representatives are brought in, that you have a meeting prior and you make it very clear. These people are coming in out of the goodness of their heart with their lived experience, and they will be treated with respect, period. And no other option. The other thing that can be unintended consequences, again, I've been doing this a long time, been on a lot of committees and task force. From the flip side, you get a variety of personalities, and I'll say that very nicely. Some people have no idea what working in a work group means or what being on a task force means. They have a complete misunderstanding or lack of understanding about what research is, and they may completely take over almost every meeting, and you have to figure out how to rein them in. Some of them can come in with preconceived ideas, particularly if there's been bad medical calls or gaslighting or whatever, and they're walking in the door with a grudge already. And so a little vetting on the front end, I would highly recommend, because you just can't get anywhere if you've got someone that isn't open to discussion and open to two-way discussion and understanding both sides. So I would highly recommend a little vetting also.
Love that. And I love how you talk about making sure that everyone's on the same page. I think a lot of times, I don't know about you guys' experience, but somebody comes to you and they're like, I need a family on this committee like yesterday. And they haven't really given a whole lot of thought about how they're going to use you or what they're going to do. And so emphasizing that there's some pre-work there is, I think, really, really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I hope that everyone's on the same page, and yet that does not necessarily mean that everyone agrees at all times. There's got to be room for that conflict, because the conflict can actually be creative as well and lead to better solutions.
Absolutely. Okay, Lonnie. Sarah, I think this one's you.
I'm gonna interrupt really quick because Jill's here. So Jill, we would love for you to do a quick introduction of yourself to the group, a little bit about yourself and the organizations that you've worked with as a family member and why you chose to work with them. And then I'll do my didactic after you do that.
So sorry I'm late. Yeah, life happens. So my name is Jill McCormick, and I am the director of the Family to Family Health Information Center in Washington State. And I have 3 impacted young adults, 2 on the autism spectrum, 1 a heart transplant kiddo, young adult, and my kiddos are my journey in this space. And also the perspective I cared for my parent, my dad, and my mother. So just kind of that advocacy space of caring for another brought me to the work of how do I bring that perspective and that voice into what I do in larger spaces. So part of the work has always been guide and navigation for others, but a larger part of that work is how do I connect with the systems that our families intersect with? Whether it's at the professional level, at the regional level, at the state level, or at the federal level. What does that mean? And then how do I create spaces for families to understand how to tell their stories in a way that is impactful, that creates understanding of the challenges that families or youth and young adults face in the medical system or in those systems that interconnect with medical complexity. And then as I got connected, because my youngest kiddo was constantly in the ER, constantly being transported, constantly in hospitalization with his diagnoses, then just what's that next step? And what were those pieces where we as a family were intersecting in, we didn't know that this could happen. We didn't know that this was a journey that families took, that we were going to have to take. And this is different. This is different than walking through the door into our doctor's office or going to the specialist. This is very different. And the people who we intersect with are very different. And they look at our child differently, and they look at how they tell us information is different, and how they give us information is different, and how they listen to us is very, very different. And so once I had an opportunity to be a part of this work, it was very exciting to be able to share those perspectives, and then to work with families on how to share those perspectives on the next step.
Awesome. So I mentioned I was going to drop in some didactic and some resources. This is actually now probably about a decade old, but a systematic review meta-analysis that published in 2014 in BMC Health Services. It's one of the few studies that actually looked at documented barriers and harms of patient engagement. And the key themes are exactly what Darlene and Greta were describing. So frustration, disillusionment, or broken trust if expectations aren't aligned on both sides, to Greta's point about people may not agree, but at least being on the same page about where things are going or how things are going to function. That risk of tokenism, so the sense that having a family member or patient present is checking a box, but not actually inviting meaningful input. And then some concern about scope creep, that the operations or QI or research team might have a particular agenda or particular target, and that inviting family or patient perspectives might open up a Pandora's box and make the original project unfeasible. I think there's some good literature and examples for how all of these things can be addressed or prevented, or may be false perceptions. But it's a great paper if you're like me and want to dive into what others have written. All right, Jen, take it away. And Lonnie, we can jump to the next slide.
Outstanding. Okay, friends. And since I haven't put Jill on the hot seat yet with questions, I'm gonna start with her. So Jill, can you talk to me a little bit about your experiences and thoughts about which points in the process should people start engaging families, and where should they be involved?
So I think that it really depends on your team. It really depends on what you're doing. The ideal piece from a family perspective is that they become co-creators with you on what you're looking at and how you're doing. That doesn't always work for academic teams. That doesn't always work for research teams as you're building pieces like that. So then it comes to, how do you bring a family advisor into your space when you're looking at building specific components around gaining family perspective, bringing in someone who helps you build those questions, helps you build, looking at what point would it be good to bring in a family advisory group, a family focus group, a youth focus group, and then looking about the why. Why are you asking for family voice? Why are you looking for that perspective, and what's the intent of that perspective, so that when those families or youth or young adults come through the door, they come through the door with that vision in front of them, so that they understand the intent before they even come through the door. But they also understand that there has been a family advisor connection before they walk through the door, so that they understand that there has already been some intentional thought put into what's being asked of them. What they are being given really is created with the intent of giving them a space to talk through their journey, talk through their experiences with, and then give them the reasoning what you're going to use it for. Why are you asking those questions? And what are you going to use it for? What is the output? What's the outcome? What are you hoping that that family voice is going to change and be utilized for in your research? How is it going to enhance your research? How is it going to change what you're looking at, so that they feel valued, but they also can see, because they may help you tweak that and go, but did you think about this? If you ask these questions and we give you these answers, it's going to go this direction. But did you know that actually our kids feel this, or this is what happens with our kids. And if you ask this question, you'd get this answer. So it's like Greta said, it's that creative tension sometimes that helps kind of develop, sorry, I have a voice in the room that's not mine, develops kind of some kind, that reflection point also for your, creating that next step or thinking of that next level. And then always compensate if you can. Compensate because their time is as valuable as yours. And oftentimes they have childcare, they have, travel, they have pieces that they have to put in place just to come talk to you. So it's understanding the complexity of what they have to put in place to be a part of what you're asking them to do.
Jill, I think you took us from soup to nuts there. That was awesome. And I love the co-creation element. I think that's so important. People don't often think that you can co-create with your families, but you so can. Okay, I've got just a couple minutes left. So Greta and Darlene, is there anything that you want to add to this quickly before we jump to our next question?
Jill did a really great job. And I think one of the things to remember is to really establish an adequate plan, you have to have a better understanding from the beginning. So maybe if you're planning on an entire advisory family group, that maybe you don't bring the whole group in at the beginning, but you would have maybe 1 to 3 lead family advisors that you can really bring in at the very beginning, because they're going to be a good voice overall in the rare and chronic disease space to tell you those different issues. So that would be the one thing I'm a proponent of, really at the beginning.
I love that.
I agree
Go ahead,
with
Greta.
that, just because too many things may get started without you even realizing it, because you're in that bubble of your own. And it is really, as Jill alludes to, and even Darlene, that it's going to be difficult. It's not going to be easy to start off from the beginning with that that input, but it's going to pay dividends that will save you in many ways that you hopefully we'll never even have to deal with the ways that it is of value, because yeah, that beginning point is, it's the spark of creativity. And maybe at that point is when someone should put the kibosh on things that are just like, that's not copacetic over there. So
Oh, I love that. Okay, Lonnie, let's do our next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah for a quick didactic.
Actually, let's jump one more because I want to do the next question and then I'll come back to this at the end.
Beautiful. Love it. Okay, friends. So next question, and let's start with Darlene. How much detail regarding a project is helpful for you to know when you're being asked to contribute?
I'm going to say a great deal. So number one, the proposed subject of the project, or the proposed purpose and outcome. And because as an individual, you need to know if you fit. You may have a big heart and want to help, but you might not really fit. And you might have a friend who would be a great fit. So that's also good. Also, what are the time requirements? Is there travel involved? Is there going to be, how many meetings? How often are the meetings? How many meetings? What is the main timeline, the proposed timeline? And if there are in-person meetings, is there any compensation for the time that you spend? And as Jill mentioned, if you have dependent children that have to be cared for and allowed for, all of those things are vitally important. And then, of course, what your intended input, what they intend your input to be? You know, is there going to be a subcommittee that they maybe want you to lead? That's really important to know.
That's super important, Darlene. And I love that you brought up some of the barriers that families can face for participation, right? Like they need to know so that they can help mitigate those. Greta, what would you like to add?
I'd like to know what the researchers already know. So that, you know, it gives me a chance, it would give me a chance to kind of um, you know, begin my participation in being able to take a critical look at what it is that they believe that they have already learned, and so that I'm kind of getting up to speed with them before I jump in. And then, you know, of course, as much as it's great to make sure that everybody is a good fit, you want to make sure that you're also not tempted to just recruit a bunch of yes men or yes ladies, you know. So you want to make sure that they are you know, comfortable. And again, you know, in dealing with that hierarchical difference in terms of education and income and status and all of these things, but yet they're still comfortable to be able to actually bring their perspective. It may not be something that you know, agree with initially or immediately, but maybe eventually, as you work with them, you may be able to more clearly understand where they're coming from. And that's part of the collaborative as well, as growing your um, perspective and growing your ability to learn from people that don't have the same kind of medical school background, because those are most of the people that you're going to be treating, especially kids, of course, you know, they're not going to have that. So, yeah.
No, that's super important. Jill, do you have anything you want to add in like a minute?
I just a couple of things. The intended or the hoped projected outcomes, and how this perspective is hoped to be utilized towards that. That's always really important to me. But also, I have found the most successful integration of family voice into work that I have done with research and with systems change has been those groups that have left their letters at the door. So that there isn't an us and them space, that it is we all come to the table at an even space to do the work. There are people who know the work better and they bring that through the door, but it isn't this that, yeah, you check your letters at the door.
Outstanding. I think that's super important. Okay, I'm going to pass it to Sarah. She's going to take us home today. But while I'm here, I hope everybody gives a round of applause in your own special space to our wonderful fans for chatting with us today. Thank you guys. You're amazing.
Milani, if you want to jump to the next. So obviously we just sort of scratched the surface, but I think kind of the take-home messages and principles that Darlene, Greta, and Jill have shared, I take to heart every day and think are really valuable. If you need some written resources or other guidance, either to guide your own teams or to take to your system leadership for various things, I would direct you to the Children with Special Healthcare Needs Network Lived Experience in Healthcare and Health Systems Research Handbook. It's developed for researchers, but has fabulous, fabulous resources along the whole spectrum. And that table that we flashed up and jumped past comes right out of that. I find their standard of compensation for youth, family, and patient partners incredibly helpful for local advocacy to change some practice that was a little bit out of date. Family Voices is just a wealth of resources. And their family engagement and systems assessment toolkit is a really great place for teams to do a self-assessment and figure out where are we on this journey towards bringing in family and patient voice, and where are our gaps, as well as some other resources there. And we're out of time, so I'm giving the podium back to Lonnie. Thank you guys so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you. Thank you both, and thank your family team for this insightful discussion. Your presentation highlighted how family engagement is vital to quality improvement, operational strategies, and research efforts. So we thank you for that powerful presentation. I'm sorry, we won't have any time for questions, but if there is anyone that have questions for them, they can put it in the chat and we'll get that information and responses from you to them as soon as possible. Thank you for that wonderful presentation.